"I am done with this life," she said casually, as if the words carried no weight. But for Michael, sitting across the breakfast table, they were enough to make the morning sun seem harsh and cold. He had always believed their marriage to be steady, predictable in its quiet routines, yet Sarah's tone, sharp and final, cut through that illusion in an instant. The coffee in his hand trembled slightly, the steam rising in a wavering line that mirrored his heart rate, as he processed what she had just revealed. She was leaving him, and not just leaving, but moving on to his best friend, someone he had trusted for years. The room felt smaller suddenly, walls pressing in with the weight of betrayal, while his mind raced to comprehend how ordinary words could carry such extraordinary consequences. Michael tried to steady himself, forcing a calm he did not feel, wondering if he should ask why or say something, anything. But the conversation had a rhythm that left no room for argument, Sarah's voice carrying a certainty that stifled any protest. He observed her calmly, noting the casual grace with which she set down her cup, her eyes meeting his only briefly before darting to the window, as if the bright morning could shield her from the gravity of her confession. For a moment, Michael felt suspended between disbelief and a rising resolve, understanding that the world he knew had shifted in a single, irrevocable moment. His mind flickered through images of shared holidays, quiet evenings, and the life they had built, now fractured by her sudden declaration. Outside, the city hummed with the indifference of 1,000 other lives continuing unimpeded, a stark contrast to the storm of emotions consuming him internally. Michael's thoughts shifted to the practical, the way he would navigate the coming days, the inevitable questions of family, friends, and work colleagues who would soon learn that the man they knew had been blindsided. He considered his options, each path carrying its own uncertainties, yet a single thread of determination began to weave through his confusion, a quiet insistence that he would not be defined by this moment of loss. Sarah continued speaking, unaware of the silent calculations taking place in Michael's mind, describing plans, new beginnings, and the excitement of a life he had been excluded from. Her words a mixture of excitement and carelessness, each one a reminder of the personal upheaval he now faced. He noticed details he had never observed before, the subtle tension in her posture, the way her voice lingered on certain phrases, the almost imperceptible shift of her gaze, as if she sensed the enormity of what she had just said. Michael let her speak, allowing the moment to unfold fully, understanding that his response would need to be measured, deliberate, and reflective of a mind that refused to be broken. As she finally paused, perhaps expecting tears or protest, he merely nodded, a small, controlled movement that belied the storm of thoughts within, and for the first time, he felt a sense of clarity emerging from the chaos. This was not the end of his story, merely a turning point, a moment that would demand ingenuity, resilience, and the quiet fortitude he had cultivated over years of navigating challenges both personal and professional. Michael rose from the table, setting his empty cup down with deliberate care, and stepped toward the window, looking out over the city with a renewed focus, realizing that while one chapter of his life had abruptly closed, another, filled with potential and the promise of redemption, was about to begin, and in that understanding, he found the first stirrings of purpose, determination, and the unspoken resolve to reclaim not just his life, but his dignity and the narrative that he would write for himself from this moment forward, aware that every decision, every action, would now be guided by a newfound clarity and the unwavering commitment to prove that setbacks, no matter how painful, could be transformed into the foundation of a triumphant, self-directed future. Michael left the apartment with a quiet determination, the weight of betrayal heavy on his shoulders, yet his mind was unusually clear as he navigated the bustling streets toward his new opportunity, each step deliberate, his focus sharpening with the thought that the coming days would be defined by action rather than words. And though the city hummed with indifferent life, he felt a sense of personal revolution stirring inside him, a quiet fire that refused to be quenched by disappointment. He reflected on the past moments, the subtle hints he had overlooked, the small signs that had revealed Sarah's growing detachment, and yet he did not dwell on them, understanding that hindsight offered no solution, only perspective, and perspective was the foundation upon which he would rebuild. Arriving at the building where his new job awaited, he took a deep breath, noting the familiar sights of his chosen industry, the orderly chaos of office life, the hum of computers, the murmur of colleagues engaged in tasks both mundane and critical, and he felt a sense of belonging, a reconnection with a world where his skills, intellect, and patience could be put to practical use, far from the personal upheaval that had dominated his mornings. The receptionist offered a polite smile, a small gesture that reminded him of the human warmth that still existed outside the cold calculus of personal betrayal, and Michael returned the smile with subtle grace, knowing that composure and professionalism were his allies as he navigated this new chapter. As he walked through the corridors, he encountered colleagues who welcomed him, some with curiosity, others with the faintest recognition of his reputation in previous roles, and each interaction served as a confirmation that life, though disrupted, continued to offer opportunities for those willing to engage fully and without reservation. Michael paused near a large window, looking out over the city, the sun now higher, casting long shadows and brilliant reflections that danced across the streets below, and he felt a sense of release, a temporary suspension of the weight of personal concerns, replaced by strategic focus on his own objectives and the tangible tasks before him. He reflected on the choices he would need to make, the initiatives to propose, the collaborations to form, and in this reflection, he found clarity and a sense of power that had been dormant, now reawakened by circumstance and necessity, a testament to his resilience and capacity for reinvention. The day unfolded with measured steps, meetings and briefings that engaged his analytical mind and affirmed his capabilities, while the personal matters remained in a separate sphere, acknowledged but not allowed to interfere, a compartmentalization that preserved his energy and focus for actions that would define his trajectory. As evening approached, Michael left the office, the city now bathed in the warm glow of sunset, and he felt a quiet satisfaction in having navigated the day with poise and intentionality, understanding that while the past could not be rewritten, the present offered a canvas for deliberate, thoughtful action, and he was ready to shape his life on terms determined by his own vision, courage, and resolve, aware that each decision, each strategic choice, was a step toward a future he would define. Michael arrived at the new office with a calm determination, feeling the weight of the previous day's lift as he stepped into a space filled with possibility and professional energy, the sleek glass walls reflecting sunlight and offering a panoramic view of the city below. And he felt a surge of motivation as he prepared to engage with colleagues who, while unaware of his personal challenges, welcomed him with polite curiosity and the faint recognition of his reputation, setting a tone of subtle respect that reinforced his sense of competence. He moved through the hallways, observing the organized chaos of the workplace, the constant hum of conversations and typing, and it reminded him that life continued beyond personal setbacks, that his skills and strategic thinking had intrinsic value independent of relationships that had faltered, and he allowed himself to absorb that perspective, feeling a renewed clarity about priorities and long-term goals. Entering a conference room, he was greeted by a few key team members, each offering a handshake or nod of acknowledgement, and he responded with composure, understanding that measured confidence and attentive listening would establish his place in this new environment, demonstrating that his past circumstances did not diminish his capabilities. As he sat through initial briefings, Michael noted opportunities for process improvements, potential partnerships, and ways to leverage existing resources for maximum efficiency, and he felt a quiet excitement as ideas formulated, providing a constructive focus that redirected any residual frustration into actionable plans, solidifying his sense of agency and reinforcing the understanding that resilience was a skill honed through thoughtful engagement rather than reaction. During a break, he stepped near the window, gazing over the bustling streets, the city alive with movement and potential, and he reflected on the personal journey that had brought him here, appreciating the value of patience, timing, and the ability to remain composed when external circumstances threatened to destabilize his focus. Observing the rhythm of the city below, he imagined the trajectory of upcoming projects, visualizing steps, outcomes, and adjustments, integrating both ambition and careful analysis, recognizing that each decision, each interaction, could shape the trajectory of his career and personal life. Michael felt a renewed confidence, a reassurance that while some elements of life were beyond control, his actions, planning, and consistent effort would determine his forward momentum, and he resolved to channel energy into constructive endeavors while maintaining an awareness of the lessons learned from personal challenges. As the afternoon progressed, he engaged more deeply with team members, contributing insights, asking questions, and demonstrating adaptability, establishing trust and a subtle authority grounded in competence and vision. And by the close of the day, Michael felt a quiet satisfaction in having navigated both the professional environment and his own internal adjustments with integrity, focus, and a clear sense of direction, ready to take the next steps in shaping a life that reflected his values, skills, and thoughtful approach to opportunity. Michael spent the morning settling into his role, reviewing documents and familiarizing himself with internal workflows, noting key projects that required immediate attention and identifying colleagues whose expertise aligned with his objectives, each interaction reinforcing his understanding of the company's culture and the collaborative energy that fueled productivity, making him appreciate the difference between being reactive and taking deliberate steps to shape outcomes. And he realized that thoughtful observation and strategic engagement could redefine his position and influence without overt confrontation or unnecessary risk. As he walked through the office, observing the rhythm of meetings, phone calls, and team discussions, he reflected on past experiences where haste or emotion had clouded judgment, and he resolved to apply a methodical approach that valued clarity and consistency over impulse, recognizing that this strategy would not only restore confidence in his professional abilities but also enhance respect among peers. He joined a mid-morning planning session, listening attentively to proposals and offering insights grounded in analytical reasoning, demonstrating his capacity to contribute meaningfully while fostering trust and encouraging collaborative problem-solving. And he noticed that his calm demeanor and thoughtful contributions gradually shifted perceptions, reinforcing his sense of empowerment and self-efficacy. During a break, he stepped outside to a small terrace, feeling the cool breeze and observing the cityscape, appreciating the continuity of life and the opportunities that unfolded with each passing hour. And he allowed himself a moment to acknowledge personal growth, the resilience developed through adversity, and the value of patience, all of which had brought him to a position where he could act decisively and with foresight. Returning to the office, Michael focused on refining strategies for key projects, aligning objectives with available resources and team strengths, and developing contingency plans that ensured flexibility without compromising core goals, understanding that proactive preparation was as important as execution, and that every calculated decision contributed to sustainable progress. As the afternoon progressed, he interacted with team members to clarify expectations and offer guidance, fostering a supportive atmosphere that encouraged initiative and accountability. And he noticed that subtle shifts in communication style and attention to detail produced tangible improvements in workflow and morale, reinforcing the power of consistent, thoughtful leadership. By the end of the day, Michael had established a clear plan for upcoming initiatives, strengthened professional relationships, and cultivated an internal sense of accomplishment, appreciating that measured action, awareness of organizational dynamics, and strategic foresight would guide future success while preserving integrity and focus. And he left the office with a renewed sense of purpose, ready to approach each challenge with composure, clarity, and confidence, knowing that his deliberate efforts would shape both immediate outcomes and long-term growth. That evening, Michael returned to the apartment not because he still believed it was home, but because there are places a man must enter one last time before he can stop letting them own him. The living room looked exactly the way it had that morning, which made the betrayal feel almost insulting. Sarah's coffee cup was still near the sink. The throw blanket she always used was folded over the arm of the sofa. A framed photo from their anniversary trip to Asheville stood on the shelf beside a small ceramic bowl where they used to drop their keys. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. Michael stood in the doorway for a moment, listening to the quiet, remembering Sarah's voice at the breakfast table as she explained that she was leaving, that Daniel Brooks, his best friend since college, understood her better now, that Michael's new job offer was too little and too late, that she needed a life with someone who did not always seem one step behind. She had not screamed. That almost made it worse. She had spoken with the clean confidence of someone who had already rehearsed the ending with another man. Michael walked to the kitchen and opened the drawer where they kept household documents. Mortgage records, insurance papers, joint account statements, the old lease from their first apartment. He placed them in neat stacks on the table, not because he wanted to fight Sarah in the ugliest way possible, but because he finally understood that calm men still need proof when others try to rewrite their value. His phone buzzed. A message from Daniel appeared on the screen. "I hope you can be mature about this." Michael stared at the sentence until the words became almost funny. Mature. That was what people asked of the person they had wounded when they wanted the wound to remain quiet. A second message arrived from Sarah. "I will come by tomorrow for my things. Please do not make it uncomfortable." Michael set the phone down without replying. The old version of him would have typed paragraphs. He would have explained that Daniel had eaten at their table, borrowed his truck, stood beside him at the wedding, called him brother in every speech that mattered. He would have reminded Sarah that the new job offer she mocked was not a failure, but a senior operations role at Halden Ridge Logistics, a company preparing for a national expansion that few people in their circle even knew about yet. He would have told her that he had accepted the offer that afternoon, not because he wanted to impress her, but because the interview panel had seen the exact steadiness she called weakness. But some truths lose power when they are pleaded. So Michael did something different. He opened his laptop and wrote a short email to the hiring director, confirming his start date, relocation availability, and willingness to take on the restructuring project in Denver for the first quarter. Then he called a lawyer recommended by a colleague and scheduled a consultation for the next morning. After that, he walked through the apartment with a cardboard box, collecting the things that were truly his. His father's watch, 2 notebooks from graduate school, a stack of project binders, an old baseball signed by his grandfather, and the blue mug Sarah always said was too plain. He left everything else untouched. Let her see the spaces he had not emptied yet. Let her realize later that his absence would be more precise than anger. Near midnight, Michael sat at the table with the job offer letter in front of him. The salary was higher than anything Sarah imagined. The relocation bonus alone was more than what Daniel made in 3 months. But the number was not what steadied him. What steadied him was the title, the trust, the chance to walk into a place where he was not being measured by people who had benefited from his loyalty and then called it small. He folded the offer letter, placed it inside his briefcase, and looked once more at the photo on the shelf. In it, Sarah was smiling beside him in the North Carolina mountains, her hand tucked inside his arm, as if he were the safest place in the world. Michael did not touch the frame. He turned off the kitchen light and left the apartment quietly, not as a man running from humiliation, but as a man finally refusing to live inside someone else's downgrade of him. The morning sun spilled into Michael's new apartment, cutting through the blinds in sharp lines that drew attention to every detail he had chosen carefully, every piece of furniture selected to reflect not just style, but the freedom he had finally claimed. He sat at the breakfast bar with a cup of dark roast coffee, untouched messages from Sarah and Daniel on his phone reminding him that the past was still attempting to reach him. But for the first time, those messages felt distant, like whispers from a life that belonged to someone else. The documents he had left for the lawyer yesterday now lay neatly organized in folders, ready for the legal steps that would ensure the property and finances were properly divided. But Michael found he was not obsessed with revenge or proving a point. He was obsessed with precision, with clarity, with the meticulous execution of his own plan to move forward. His mind wandered back to the meeting at Halden Ridge Logistics, where the CEO had smiled knowingly as Michael presented his ideas for streamlining operations and integrating new technology. The role offered him a challenge he had never dared to seek when comfort and routine had defined his life. It was thrilling to consider how he would restructure teams, motivate employees, and introduce processes that would make the company more efficient. But beyond professional triumph, Michael felt an almost tangible sense of personal rebirth. His thoughts flickered briefly to the humiliating moments with Sarah, the whispered criticisms, the casual dismissals, and he realized that the anger he expected to feel had been replaced by an almost serene determination. He walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline, imagining the long days ahead filled with decisions that would shape the lives of many, including his own. The phone buzzed, but this time it was a message from a colleague congratulating him on the promotion and expressing excitement about collaborating. There was no mention of the past, no hidden jabs, only genuine recognition of his skills. Michael smiled, sipping his coffee, and considered how he would use this energy, this focus, to not only excel at his job, but also to redefine himself entirely. The thought of Sarah and Daniel faded into the background, replaced by meetings, strategy sessions, and the satisfaction of seeing tangible results from his work. He drafted a rough schedule for the week, including time to call his parents, check in on old friends, and even start a small personal project he had shelved long ago, a community program to support local young professionals entering the logistics field. As he organized his day, he realized that moving forward was not about vengeance. It was about building a life so precise and purposeful that the shadows of yesterday had no room to linger. Michael placed his coffee on the counter, took a deep breath, and for the first time in many months, felt completely in control, poised to face the challenges of the future with clarity, focus, and a quiet, unshakable confidence. Sarah did not begin to regret Michael when he left the apartment. She began to regret him when the life she chose started requiring the qualities she had mocked in him. For the first few weeks, she convinced herself everything was moving exactly as it should. Daniel Brooks helped her carry boxes into his townhome, bought new wine glasses, cleared half a closet, and told her she had been brave to choose happiness. Sarah repeated that word often because it made the betrayal sound like healing. Brave, mature, honest. But the shine faded faster than she expected. Daniel was charming in restaurants and easy in front of friends, but he had never been the man who remembered when her car registration was due, who checked the smoke detector without being asked, who quietly paid the bill before the reminder became stressful, or who could sit beside her on a hard day without making her explain why she was tired. Daniel liked being chosen. He liked proving he had won. He did not like maintaining a life after the applause stopped. At first, Sarah blamed the awkwardness on transition. Then she blamed Michael. "He is dragging out the legal process," she told Daniel one night. Though Michael had answered every document through his attorney on time and without drama, Daniel shrugged while scrolling his phone. Maybe he is finally trying to feel important. The sentence should have sounded loyal. Instead, it sounded careless, because Sarah suddenly remembered Michael at their old kitchen table, reading contracts line by line so she would not miss anything important. Michael had never needed to sound superior to be useful. Meanwhile, his name began appearing in places Sarah had not expected. A mutual friend sent her an article about Halden Ridge Logistics opening its Denver restructuring hub, with Michael listed as the senior operations director leading the expansion. The article described him as measured, disciplined, and unusually trusted by executive leadership. Sarah read that line 3 times. Measured, disciplined, trusted. The same traits she had called boring when she wanted Daniel's attention to feel like adventure. A week later, Daniel came home irritated from lunch with old college friends. "People are acting like Michael is some kind of genius now," he said, dropping his keys on the counter. "It is logistics, not rocket science." Sarah looked at him and realized he was not angry because Michael had succeeded. He was angry because Michael had succeeded without looking back. That was the part neither of them had expected. Michael did not post cryptic messages. He did not ask mutual friends about her. He did not show up to reclaim anything. He became absent with such clean discipline that Sarah began to feel erased from a future she assumed would always contain his reaction. Then came the invitation. Halden Ridge was hosting a private launch reception in Denver for partners, investors, and regional leaders. Sarah received it through a client connection, not from Michael. Daniel insisted they should go. "Let him see we are doing fine," he said. But his voice had the thin edge of competition, not confidence. Sarah agreed because pride is often louder than wisdom until the door opens. The reception was held in a renovated brick warehouse with warm lights, polished concrete floors, and large windows facing the mountains in the distance. Sarah walked in beside Daniel wearing a black dress and a smile she had practiced in the hotel mirror. Then she saw Michael across the room. He stood near a group of executives in a dark tailored suit, listening more than speaking, his posture calm, his face focused, his presence different in a way she could not dismiss. He did not look wounded. He did not look abandoned. He looked like a man who had stopped asking small rooms to understand him. When the company president introduced him, the room quieted naturally. Michael stepped to the front and spoke about rebuilding systems, protecting workers during transitions, and creating structures that lasted beyond individual ambition. His voice carried no bitterness, but every word sounded like something Sarah had once owned and thrown away. Daniel leaned toward her and whispered, "He rehearsed that." Sarah did not answer. She was watching the way people looked at Michael, not with pity, not with surprise, but with respect that did not need to be forced. After the speech, Michael's eyes found hers for one brief second across the room. No shock, no pleading, no anger, just recognition, then distance. He nodded politely, as he might to any guest, and turned back to a conversation with the governor's economic advisor. Sarah felt the regret arrive quietly, not as a dramatic collapse, but as a cold understanding. She had not left a man with no future. She had left before his future stopped making room for her. The moment Michael turned away at the Denver reception, Sarah felt something inside her sink lower than pride could reach. She had expected many things when she agreed to attend the launch with Daniel. She expected awkwardness. She expected Michael to notice her dress, her new ring, Daniel's hand at her back, the life she had chosen so quickly after forcing him out. She expected, if she was honest, some shadow of pain in his face that would prove she still mattered enough to wound him. What she did not expect was courtesy without longing. Michael's nod across the room had been polite, controlled, and empty of the hunger she had prepared herself to reject. It unsettled her more than anger would have. Daniel felt it too, though he called it something else. "He is enjoying this," he muttered as they moved toward the bar. All that humble speech about systems and people. He always did know how to make himself sound noble. Sarah looked at Daniel's profile under the warm warehouse lights and saw the tightness around his mouth. Once, she had mistaken that sharpness for confidence. Now it looked like envy wearing a better suit. "He sounded professional," she said. Daniel gave her a quick look. "Do not tell me you are impressed. I am saying the room respected him. The room does not know him the way we do." Sarah almost asked what Daniel meant by we, because no one in that room had known Michael the way she had. Daniel had known the funny college version, the friend who loaned him money without making it humiliating, the steady man who showed up when others disappeared. Sarah had known the husband who checked tire pressure before road trips, remembered her mother's prescriptions, read the fine print on their mortgage refinance, and stayed calm during every crisis she later called boring. The more people approached Michael that evening, the worse Daniel became. A regional investor shook Michael's hand with both hands and thanked him for saving 200 jobs during the restructuring phase. A senior vice president told a small group that Michael had caught a flaw in the expansion model that would have cost the company millions. The company president laughed and said, "That is why we brought him in. He sees what everyone else is too busy to see." Sarah looked down into her glass of sparkling water. She remembered telling Michael he was always one step behind. The sentence now felt less like truth and more like something she had said because Daniel was standing beside her at the time and she wanted to sound certain. Then Michael stepped onto a smaller platform near the back of the room for a brief partner acknowledgement. He did not mention betrayal. He did not mention rebuilding after personal loss. He thanked the operations teams, the warehouse supervisors, the analysts, and the people whose names rarely appeared in press releases, but whose work kept everything from falling apart. Sarah heard the line and felt her throat tighten. People whose names rarely appeared, but whose work kept everything from falling apart. That had been Michael in their marriage. He had kept things from falling apart so well that she had mistaken the absence of crisis for the absence of value. Daniel leaned close again. "He is milking this." Sarah stepped slightly away. "Stop." Daniel blinked. "What?" "Just stop." It was not loud, but it was the first time all evening she had refused to carry his bitterness for him. Daniel's face hardened. "You dragged me here, Sarah. You wanted to come. Because I thought you were done caring what he did." She looked across the room, where Michael was speaking with an older woman from the governor's office, his attention steady, respectful, unforced. "Maybe I am not caring the way you think." Daniel laughed under his breath, but the sound had no warmth. "Do not tell me you are having regrets now. You chose me." There it was. Not love. Ownership. The phrase landed with a dull clarity. "You chose me." Daniel had always treated her choice like a trophy. Michael had treated her choice like a promise. The difference had taken too long to become visible. Later, near the coat check, Sarah found herself alone for 30 seconds while Daniel took a call outside. Michael walked past with a folder under his arm, and she said his name before courage could leave her. He stopped, turned, and waited. "You did well tonight," she said. It was too small for what she meant, but it was all she could manage. "Thank you." His voice was kind, but guarded. "I did not know the job was this big." "You did not ask." The words were not cruel. That made them harder. Sarah swallowed. "I thought Daniel understood me better." Michael looked toward the glass doors where Daniel stood outside, phone to his ear, pacing under the Denver night. "Maybe he understood the version of you that wanted to leave." She blinked back tears. "And you?" Michael held her gaze for one quiet second. "I understood the version of you that promised not to." Then he nodded once and walked away. Sarah remained beside the coat check, surrounded by expensive coats and soft conversation, realizing the grand reveal was not Michael's title, his salary, or the respect in that room. It was the fact that he no longer needed her to regret anything for him to keep moving forward. Sarah sat in the quiet of her living room, the soft hum of the city outside filtering through half-closed blinds, reflecting on the chain of events that had reshaped her life. She thought about Michael's calm composure at the Denver reception, how his presence alone had reminded her of what consistency and true resolve looked like, and she realized that her own decisions had been reactions, often driven by pride or misunderstanding. And now the magnitude of Michael's dignity left her. Reassessing everything, Daniel's voice still lingered in her ears from that night, insisting that Michael was exploiting the situation. Yet she knew better. She knew the quiet strength of a man who had built his life on patience and unseen sacrifices. It forced her to confront her own role in the disruption. The pride that led her to dismiss him and embrace someone she thought offered excitement over substance. She thought about the quiet moments they had shared, the subtle ways Michael had shown care that never required acknowledgement, and it struck her how often the loudest gestures are the least meaningful. Michael had moved forward without rancor, without a need for validation, a lesson she felt deeply and personally. She wondered how many times she had misjudged people around her, assumed intentions, allowed ego to overshadow reality. And in this reflection, she asked herself what her own story would look like if she had approached life with the same steady patience. If she had measured responses instead of reacting impulsively. The question extended to the audience now. What would you have done in Sarah's place? How would you have handled the blend of pride, regret, and recognition? And in thinking about this, it became clear that life's lessons often come quietly, in the patience of others and in moments of self-awareness. This story is not just about Michael and Sarah. It is about understanding that strength is often silent, that dignity is measured by actions more than words, and that choices carry consequences that can teach us far more than immediate victories. As you consider this tale of growth, pride, and humility, ask yourself how your own decisions reflect your values, what patterns you might be repeating without realizing, and how recognition of others' integrity can reshape your own perspective. If you found this story enlightening, thought-provoking, or reflective of challenges in your own life, consider subscribing to the channel for more narratives that explore human resilience, subtle lessons, and the intricate dance of pride and humility in everyday decisions. And take a moment to share in the comments how you would react in Sarah's position, what insights resonate most with you, and how understanding someone like Michael could influence your approach to relationships and life choices. It is in this interactive reflection that the story extends beyond the screen and into personal introspection, connecting viewers through shared exploration of dignity, patience, and the quiet power of moving forward thoughtfully.